Hi, my name is Bethany, and I will be teaching you guys today. This is the Alaska Wild Berry Identification Workshop. So glad to have you guys here. We're going to go over some really great stuff today. We're going to be going over um, where and when to pick berries, some of the tools of the trade for berry pickers. So what are they using to pick berries? What's the best thing to pick with? We're going to go over how to safely pick berries. And we're also going to go over some common edible berries that are kind of easy to identify. And last but not least, we'll go over resources and repetition. And so it's just some stuff that you guys can use to help you when you're picking berries to pick safely, and also people that you can go to help you identify the berries correctly, because that is always a good thing to have. In case you're ever in doubt about something, always double check. So just a little bit about myself. I don't actually work as a wildlife biologist. I actually work at the library now, but I do have a degree in wildlife biology and conservation that I got at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, so I'm familiar with a lot of different plants and animals around the peninsula. I also grew up here, and I've been picking with my family since I could walk, so I'm really familiar with lots of different berries from around Alaska, but the ones we're going to specifically look at today are some ones that I feel are easier to find, and also berries that are not as easy to get mixed up, because you don't want to mix up a berry that's good with a berry that's poisonous. So we're going to kind of go through that a little bit. First off, when and where to pick berries. So some of you are probably wondering, when should I start looking for berries? Well, the first part of July is usually a good time to start looking if you're looking for strawberries. If you're looking for something else, usually it's in August, usually beginning of August to late August for things like raspberries. You might still get some raspberries showing up in the bushes, but they'll be kind of going down. And a lot of the other berries are going to be coming in August and September. So late August, early September, they'll be finishing up, and it'll be good for picking. So those are the kind of times that you're going to be wanting to look for certain berries. If you look for berries outside of those times, then what you're going to be wanting to do is look for the plant, figure out where the plants are, and we'll talk about how to identify the plants a little bit. And then you can kind of come in and you'll know already where you need to go when it's actually berry picking season. Something else that you guys should probably remember is to know where you're picking. There's two different kinds of land. There's private land and there's public land. Private land is privately owned. It could be your own house, which of course, if it's your own house, you have permission to pick there. That's your berries. If it's somebody else's house, you may need to ask them permission. It's always ask permission before you start picking berries. You don't want to have any trouble with your neighbors or any trouble with somebody else. So if you don't know who owns the land, don't pick there. It's just not worth fighting over. The other thing is it could be public land. So public land, there's a lot of different types of public land. The two that I would suggest for you to pick on are probably either the type of public land I would advise you guys to pick on is probably either park land, so like national park land, or the Bureau of Land Management land. Both of those people are allowed to use for private use. So if you wanted to go out and camp, you can camp on those lands. If you wanted to do things like pick berries, you could pick berries on those lands. They only have one stipulation, and that's that you have to be using it just for you and your family. So it's fine for you to pick there, and you can pick a lot there, but it has to just be for use for you and your family. You can't pick a bunch of wild blueberries and then go sell it at the farmer's market. That's not allowed. So it has to be just for you and your family, but if that's what you're doing, then it's perfect. It's a great place to go. And there's lots of land out there that is great for berries. So I would advise you to figure out where the land is that you kind of want to go, and then make sure you know who owns it so you know exactly what you need to do. All right, tools of the trade. So most of you guys know that berry pickers have some great tools on hand, right? Number one tool is your own hands. Haha! These are free. They come with you. So your hands are actually really, really good for berries. It turns out that they're really good at picking just the berry, so they're not going to get a lot of sticks and leaves in there when they're picking berries. Sometimes you have things like berry rakes, which are really good because they kind of scoop up the berries, and that works awesome, but they will pick up a lot of sticks. And if you have a berry that's really easy to squish, it can sometimes squish them. So instead of getting a nice handful of berries from your berry rake, you might get a big puddle of squished berry juice. And that's not as great. So the berry rake is really good for things like crowberries or cranberries, which are sturdier berries that hold their shape even after freezing. Those are fantastic. Some blueberries are okay. Other ones are really delicate. Things like raspberries, the hand rake isn't really going to help you with. Strawberries, not always a great choice to use this hand rake. Even some of the blueberries in Alaska, we have a couple different types. And so some of them are actually much squishier than others, is how I like to put it. And they will turn into just puddles of goo with very little effort. So you want to be careful with those ones, especially to keep in mind whether you're using a rake or not. They're not necessary to use a rake, but for some berries they work okay. Now the number one thing you really need is to make sure you have some bear spray. And a lot of people don't think about this, but the bear spray is super important. You're not the only one who wants some delicious berries. And it's always better to be safe than sorry. So you want to make sure you take the bear spray with you in case you have an encounter with a bear. It's life or death for a bear, whether they get enough calories in the year, because they're going to go hibernate soon, and they know it, and they really need these berries. And so they are not going to be in the best mood if you show up at their berry patch. So carry your bear spray with you. Usually bear spray has a shelf life of 4 years. You should check on the back of it. It has an expiration date. They're not that expensive. I know it seems kind of expensive, but since it's good for 4 years, remember you can kind of divide the price by 4. That's all it costs to be safe this year. And it really is worth it. Better safe than sorry, and it will help keep you a little bit safer. Before you buy it, I do suggest you check that expiration date. Sometimes the stores don't remember to check the expiration date, so you don't want to buy a can and find out it's only good for 1 year. Definitely go for the ones that are good for 4 years. So check the back on the expiration date before you buy it, and then make sure you take it with you and check it every year before you go, just to make sure that your can is up to date and you don't need to just go get another one. We live in Alaska, so even if you're going out in your own backyard, you never know. You never know what's out there. And when you're going around something as delicious as a berry, you really can't fault the bears for hanging around there too. So definitely keep that guy with you guys. All right, next up we're talking about picking safely. So I mentioned this a little bit about those bears, but wildlife safety is a big part of it, right? So that's making sure you don't sneak up on those bears. But there's also things that are more dangerous than bears. Do you guys know what could be more dangerous than a bear? A moose. Oh, we all know why the bear's there, right? The bear is there for the berries. Okay, he's not really interested in you. The moose, you don't really know why the moose is there. And moose have a habit of changing their mind about things. So they at first seem like they're perfectly cool and happy with you being there and they don't care. And then all of a sudden they decide that they can't care less about having you there and would rather you just get out. So you don't want to sneak up on the moose. You don't want to sneak up on the bear. You want them to know you're there, and you also probably should get out if you see them. So if they show up, or if you're going to your berry spot and you see them, just turn around, go back to the car. It's safer that way, and it's not worth the risk. You know, a bucket of berries is just not worth the risk. However, when you're headed out there, before you've gotten to your spot, something that can keep you safe is just to talk. Talking loudly, singing, and whistling will let the wildlife around you know that you're coming. Most animals actually would like to get out of our way. Okay, people are dangerous, and most animals know that, including bears. Bears are actually pretty scared of you. Surprise, surprise. They know that we're dangerous, and they know that messing with humans is not a good thing. So, if they hear you coming, they will usually get out of the way, or they will let you know that they are there. But nobody gets surprised, and that's the important part. So, talk loudly, sing or whistle. Go in groups. So, if you go with a bunch of other people, that would be perfect. First off, bears are not as likely to attack if you're in a group. One human, maybe they'll want to attack, but two humans, oof, that's dangerous. You don't want to do that. So going in groups is protective that way. It's also protective because sometimes you feel a little bit less weird if you're talking to someone than just talking out loud, really loud, so the bears can hear you. So that kind of helps too. And then you don't have to talk loud the whole time. So if you're going out for several hours to go berry picking and you have to talk loudly this entire time, it's really hard on your voice. You kind of go hoarse in the end. But if you're sharing that responsibility with other people, so you talk for a little bit and then they talk for a little bit, it's not so hard. It's a lot easier to do. So go in groups. The other thing is if something happens when you're out there picking, say you trip and you sprain your ankle, if you're alone, that's scary. That is really scary because, like, how am I going to get to the car? What else? What am I going to do? How am I even going to get up without hurting myself more? Like, suddenly, it's terrifying. But if I'm in a group, if I know that there's other people there to help me, it may be painful, it may be embarrassing, but it's more likely to become something that's funny that we talk about. Like, 5 years later, we're joking about, oh yeah, I remember that time I fell and I tripped and I sprained my ankle and we all had to carry me down the hill. Ha ha ha, that's funny. And it is funny, but that's why it's good to go in groups, because if you do that alone, it's not funny. It's terrifying, and it's terrifying for a long time. So stay with groups. If you can all do it, just get a group and stay within eyesight of them, not just hearing. You don't want to just be able to hear them, but make sure you can see them, because sometimes when you're in the woods, your voice can sound like it's coming from a different direction. So they might think they're running towards you and they're actually going away from you. So stay within eyesight so you can actually see the other people. Maybe that means that you can't go to that other cool patch of berries. But that's okay. There's berries where you are too. And you can maybe flag down the rest of your group and say, hey, there's a huge pile over here. And then you could all go together. It's just safer that way. Last but not least on picking safely is there's this rule that I always have. If you don't know it, don't pick it. That is my rule. And it's not just about unknown berries. We do have a lot of dangerous berries here in Alaska. Some of them are actually colors that seem like they would be delicious. Some of them come in reds. Aren't all red berries delicious? No. Okay, we have red baneberries up here. Baneberries are super dangerous. So you don't want to get confused and eat the wrong berry. So if you don't know what it is, don't pick it. Use your phone, take a picture of it, and then show somebody else later. If it was a good berry that you could have eaten, shucks, you can go back for it later. But if it was a dangerous berry, dodged a bullet, right? So don't pick it if you don't know what it is. Just take a picture and leave it be, and you'll learn more about it. Maybe you'll learn that it's good, maybe you'll learn that it's not, but it's not worth risking eating. You can always try again next year. The other thing is, I'm not just worried about you guys and berries. I'm also worried that some of you might pick other things. So maybe here's a pretty little picture of a beautiful flower. Some of you might know what this is. This is monkshood. It's beautiful, isn't it? Just gorgeous. Almost want to pick a whole bouquet of it. And they usually come in big patches, so they're all over. Don't pick this. Okay, this is very, very dangerous. If you picked a bunch of these monkshood, make like a little bouquet out of it, and then decided to wipe your face, you could get sick. It's not guaranteed, but you could get very, very sick, and some people have. So always, always be careful, okay? Don't pick it. Doesn't matter if it's a flower, doesn't matter if it's a berry, doesn't matter if you mean to eat it or not. If you don't know what it is, don't pick it. I also like to say, when in doubt, throw it out. So if you are picking a bunch of stuff and then you look in your berry bucket and there's one that looks a little bit weird and you're like, throw it out. It's not worth it. Just toss it out. You can even take a picture of it before you throw it, and then you can find out later a little bit more about it. But always, always remember that. When in doubt, throw it out. Just don't pick it. Alrighty, so now that we've kind of talked a little bit about that, let's talk about some edible berries we'll be discussing. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of different berries: raspberries, blueberries, crowberries, Nagoon berries, rose hips, strawberries, and cranberries. And you notice I put little quotation marks around the word berry because not all of these are berries. And it's not just the rose hips. A lot of people think about that. But strawberries are not berries. Oh no, I've said the horrible word. Strawberries are a type of fruit, but not all fruits are berries. Things like watermelon are considered berries. Watermelon? Really? Yeah, really. So just because it says berry in its name, it might not be a berry. I'm trying to be as accurate as I can, so I'm just going to tell you guys we're talking about berries, but we're really just talking about fruit, whether or not they are a true berry or just something that's berry-like. So rose hips, for example, a lot of people don't think of them as berries. They're not really a berry at all, but a lot of people use them in similar ways that you would use a berry. So we're going to include those in our discussion. And so let's go get into it. Let's learn about these cool berries. All right, first off, we've got raspberries. Who here likes raspberries? Yep. I got a two-hander here. I like raspberries so much. So raspberries are really tasty and they're pretty easy to identify. And did you know they grow wild in Alaska? So you can find them. If I was to look for them to grow wild somewhere, it would be next to a stream or a river. They really like water that's moving. So if you see any like small streams around, you can kind of walk up and down the bank next to that stream or that river, and you'll usually run into raspberries at some point because they love growing near there. When you think of a raspberry, you think of something with, let's see if I can have a, you guys see my little mouse over here? You guys see it? Okay, good. So you see how it has that little fruit right here? And it's made of like little teeny balls. You guys see how there's little teeny balls all over the place that are stuck together? That's how you kind of know it's a raspberry. It's called a druple fruit. Yeah, that's a fun word, huh? Druple. So druple fruit, and so it's got little balls that kind of attach together. The leaves are pretty light green, so they're like light green leaves. But when you flip them over, they look almost silver on the bottom. They're like a light silvery green. They usually have thorns, so you want to be kind of careful when you're picking them. But they also have something really interesting. Raspberries usually have these green and brown stems. And that's because the green ones are the stem that just grew up this year. So you see how this one right up here is green. It is new. It just grew this year, but it will not produce fruit this year. It takes them 2 years to produce fruit. So if you see a green stem, there's not going to be any flowers on it. There's not going to be any raspberries on it. But next year, it'll turn brown. So right next to it, you can see there's this brown stem. This brown stem is going to produce fruit, it's going to produce flowers, and it's going to produce a lot of them. After 2 years, they die. So after it produces all these raspberries that season, this stem is going to die and it'll go away. But even though the stem goes away and it dies, I mean, it might still be there. It might like have like this dead stick that's just standing there, but it's all gone. So it won't produce anymore. But the root is still alive. So even if you like took a weed whacker and just like knocked all the stems off, Did you know that would not kill your raspberry plant? Craziness. They're super, super good at coming back. So even if you cut off all of their stems, they would still pop out new growth because their roots are really strong and really hardy, and they can store a lot of energy in them, so that they can keep coming back even if like a moose came by and just chomped them all down, which the moose like to do. They love these things. Also, they're related to roses. So they actually have 5 petals on their flowers. So if you ever wanted to count their flower petals, they'll have 5 big white petals. Well, small white petals. They don't have that big a flower. And they usually have lots of bees around them because for some weird reason, bees love these flowers to death. They love them. So you'll usually kind of hear the bees eating the flowers, nectar, because they like them so much. And they're kind of small flowers, but the bees find them anyway. So you can see that there's some white flowers there. And so that's why if you don't see any berries yet, you might still see the flowers, which is pretty cool. And they can get pretty big. Usually you won't see them more than 4 feet tall. But if they're in a really good area, they can be over 6 feet. You can have them towering over your head. So they're kind of fun to pick because of that. All right, next we got blueberries. I hope you guys like blueberries. Blueberries, we have mostly just bog blueberries or alpine blueberries here in Alaska. There are blue huckleberries which grow on a bigger plant, but they're harder to find, and it's easier just to find the bog blueberries. They usually aren't very big, but usually half the time, like half of that is under a big pile of moss. So really, they usually look super short when you see them. They might even look like they're that tall. They're really small looking, and they like to grow in boggy, mossy areas. So usually, there's lots of moss around them. They have a round blue-black fruit, and it's covered in something called a waxy bloom. There's a white wax coating on the outside of the berry, and you can rub it off, and it looks like the berry changes color. It's really cool. But that's also one of the few berries that does that. So if you have a blueberry and you can go like this and it changes color, you have a blueberry, guaranteed. So that's pretty nice. That's really, really helpful to know. They also, if you're going early in the year, you can see that they have these nice little pink blossoms. And they kind of bell shaped. They look like little teeny pink bells all over the plant. They have small oval shaped leaves, and it has a smooth edge. So there's no like little ridges on the edge of the leaf. So that's pretty helpful too. There's not very many plants that look like that. And once you start noticing where those leaves are, you might actually start seeing that there's more blueberry plants than you ever thought. A blueberry plant does not always produce blueberries, only if it's in really good condition. So sometimes there's a bunch of blueberry plants around you, even if they're not making berries yet. So that's kind of cool. It's cool to know that. Usually people harvest these around August and September. So this is good time to go out and look and see if there's some berries. You're going to have some competition though. There's a lot of things like spruce hens that love these. Voles and shrews love them. And so not only are you going to have to be quick because you don't want the bears to get to them first, but you're going to have to be quick because you don't want the birds to get to them first. Ah, who thought? So make sure you go out early. They're really soft berries. So you want to be careful you're not using a hand rake because it'll squish them. You want to actually use your hands for these ones. But they're super delicious and they're supposed to be really good for you. So if you ever want to go out for bog blueberries, I would totally, totally recommend it. All right, so this is another one, and some of you guys might not know this one. Are you ready for this one? Crowberries. How many of you guys have picked crowberries? Some people have. Some people have picked them. A lot of people look like they totally don't even notice them because they grow on these really short little bushes. And these bushes, they're really short and they grow on the side of hills usually. So usually you'll find them in a hilly area that kind of has lots of ups and downs, or if you're going up a mountain, and it's really easy to overlook them. And they have like these short little like needles. They look like mini pine trees almost, you know. They're just short and they have short little needle-like leaves.
and they have these really red stems. Do you guys see how red that stem is? Super red. So it's super red, and it's got these little green leaves. They are really actually awesomely good. They're really tasty. So it's kind of sad a lot of people miss them, but some of the reason is because the berry is black. People think that's kind of a weird color for berries sometimes up here. We're used to kind of those bright red berries, but these are black, and they are a matte black, which means that they're not super shiny. They kind of blend in. So you can see how the berry is not really shiny even when the light's on it. It kind of looks almost like a crow's feather, which is where they get their name. If you look at the flower, it's really hard to see. It's really, really small, but it's actually magenta in color, which is like a type of pink purple. And it has 3 petals on it. The other catch with these guys is they taste best after a frost. So has it frosted yet this year? Not really, right? No. So this is probably not a great time to go out for crowberries unless you know a super secret. You guys ready for a super secret? You can freeze them in your freezer. Mm-hmm. Oh, trick the berry. So if you pick them now, if you find a place that has some of them, pick them now, put them in your freezer, and then pull them out of your freezer. You'll trick the berry, and the berry will turn sweeter. So right now, they're probably not really great if you pick them and eat them off the bush. But pick them, put them in your freezer, take them out of your freezer, maybe even put them in one more time just to make sure. And then you'll have a super sweet, ripe berry. It'll act just like it was supposed to. So that's kind of a cool trick of the trade. You can do that with the crowberries. You could also do that with the low bush cranberries, which are called lingonberries. So those are 2 berries that you can actually trick into turning really ripe and juicy. So you can pick them really early, or you can pick them later in the year after the frost, or even after it snows, which is kind of a cool thing that you can do. All right, here's another one that you guys might not have seen, but it's a fun and really tasty berry. It's called the Nagoon berry. So this one, you can see it's a druple fruit. You remember what druple fruit means? It's got those little balls that are all stuck together. So it looks like a raspberry. In fact, some people call them Arctic raspberries. It looks like a raspberry, but it looks like someone stuck it on a strawberry plant. Doesn't that kind of look like a strawberry's leaf? A little bit. So the Nagoon berry is very short. It's usually only about like this big, maybe this big. Okay, that's about as big as it gets. And it has these really cool purple flowers that are usually 6 to 7 petals. So you can see it has 6 to 7 petals on this purple flower. And they don't grow in really big quantities. So usually you'll find a couple here, a couple there, but they're super tasty. So if you're out hunting for other berries and you see this guy, totally pick him. And he's delicious. They don't really have thorns. They have these thick hairs instead of thorns that are on the like just random hairs on their stem. And those are like almost like you would consider like a baby thorn, I guess. But that's the closest it gets. So it's not even pokey like a real raspberry, but it tastes a lot like a raspberry. They're usually deep red or dark purple drupeal fruits, so they can get really, really dark colored. And they have those 3-toothed leaflets, is what they call them, because the leaves are still stuck together. So they don't make individual leaves; they're still stuck together, so they're called leaflets. And there is a lot of difference in these. They can have them where they're really separated, so they look like 3 different leaves that are kind of on the same stem, or they can have them so they look almost like one giant leaf. They have a lot of variation in them. So really, what's helpful is if you're in that area and you see the flower. The flower is so distinctive. That's a good way of like figuring out where the plants are and what they are. And then when you see that berry, you know for sure that's the Nagoon berry. And those will also be coming up pretty quick now. I haven't checked mine in my yard yet, but those ones are coming ripe. So you might want to be checking around and see if you can see those little guys. The only thing they really get confused with is sometimes cloudberries, which are kind of a yellow, and salmonberries, which are kind of a yellow. And so they're not the same berry, but those are both edible too. However, always remember, if in doubt, throw it out. So don't pick it if you don't know what it is. So if you think you saw a Nagoon berry and you're not sure, take a picture of it. Like Fish and Game Office is awesome, awesome resource. Next up, I want to talk to you guys about as wild roses. So a lot of people don't realize you can eat those. How many people realize you can eat roses? Ooh, yeah, we got some people who knew it. Yes, you can actually eat roses. How many people think it's just the hip? Just the hip of the rose. It's not. Actually, you can eat the whole plant. I wouldn't advise eating the thorns. They're not that tasty. They're kind of pokey. But you can actually eat the leaves. You can eat the flower, or you can eat the rose hip, which kind of looks like a berry. So that's why we're talking about it today. Most people think about eating the rose hip. You can make rose hip jam out of it. The hip is just the part where the seeds are. So if you cut it in half, it's this really cool kind of reddish color. They're this like reddish colored, orangey reddish colored little ball that happens where the flower is, and you can even see the end of the flower. It's got that little leftover flower part right here, and it's got orange fruit on the inside. So the inside of it, if you cut it in half, it's got this um, orange colored fruit, and then it's got a whole bunch of seeds packed really densely in the center. So what you usually do is you scoop out the seeds, and then you can eat the fruit around it, or you can use it to make like a jam or jelly, and it's super tasty. A lot of people like to mix it with other things, so they might throw some raspberries in with some rose hips. It's super high in vitamin C. So this guy is like, if you were to compare it, it's probably like 3 oranges. So if you took an orange about the same slice size as that, you could take three orange slices that size compared to the hip, and you would be getting the same amount of vitamin C. So it was super important to people, especially in the pioneering days and beyond, for people to actually get hold of this, because it is so high in vitamin C. It helps people not get scurvy, especially with the long winters up here. A lot of times they're short on things with vitamin C. So the wild roses were a huge, important thing for people. Um, they are thorny bushes, so be careful when you're picking them. You don't want to get poked. The leaves are usually made of leaflets. So that means that there's like a lot of little teeny ones that almost look like leaves all by themselves, but they're not quite. And there's usually 3 to 7 of them, and they're oval shaped, and they're toothed, which means that they kind of are raggedy on the edges. So you can see how they're kind of got that raggedy edge to them, and so that means they're toothed. So they are toothed. That helps. They're not just smooth, but it's really the flowers. A lot of people just notice the flowers. And kind of a cool thing about the flowers is I said you could eat them. A lot of people make tea from them, but you can also make jelly from them. So a lot of people don't know that, but you can make rose petal jam, and it's super good. So some people actually collect the petals just for that, which is really cool. All right, so some of you guys probably know what this one is. This is a strawberry, right? So strawberries are super cool, and they do grow wild up here in Alaska. There's a lot of different varieties, but if you see the wild ones, they usually look like this. They're usually pretty small. They're not really big, and they can vary in color from like a light pink color all the way to a dark red, like you would expect a berry to look. But just because they're pink does not mean they're not ripe. Sometimes they just ripen at a very light color, and they're still delicious. What you're going to go off of is smell. If it smells like a strawberry, it's ripe and you can eat it. So it's just an easier way of telling if it's ripe or not. Usually they have this white flower with 5 petals. You'll see this a lot around if you go hiking and stuff. You'll see a lot around the edges of trails. They like disturbed areas, which means like edges of trails, places people walk a lot. They like to go into those areas because They can multiply really fast in that kind of soil. So areas that get disturbed, other things can't grow over them. So you'll see these guys a lot around wherever people are. I don't usually have like a specific place in the middle of nowhere that I would find them because usually they pop up where people are, and so they're really easy to find. They have tiny reddish seeds on the outside of the fruit. So if you just look at the seeds themselves, they're red, which is pretty cool. And they're not a true berry, right? Because they have the seed on the outside. But it is a fruit and it is delicious. Usually there's multiple plants connected together because they actually don't reproduce by seeds that well. What they like to do is send out roots and they will start a new plant from their roots. So they kind of clone themselves to multiply, which is really cool. They also have three toothed leaflets. So they have rough edges on the edges of their leaves. That's what toothed means. And they have leaflets, three leaflets that are connected together, kind of like our Nagoon berry. So that kind of shows you they probably are related really close, and they are. They're closely related. All right, so here's another one. These are low bush cranberries, but their actual name is lingonberry. They taste a lot like a true cranberry, but they're not quite the same. They're a little bit different. This is a lingonberry, and they grow in kind of colder environments like Alaska, but also Canada, Russia, Greenland. So you can find them in those areas. They are a small evergreen shrub. So in the middle of winter, if you go outside and you see a small plant about this big and it's got like green leaves on it still, it's not crazy. It's probably a cranberry. So they don't lose their leaves very often. They're kind of like a spruce tree that way, that they kind of keep that green hard leaf, and it is a hard leaf. If you pick up that leaf and you feel it, it feels like it's made of plastic. It feels like it's a fake leaf. It's not. It's a real leaf. It's just really, really well protected. Nothing really wants to eat this thing because its leaves are so hard. So that's how it protects itself so that it can produce a lot of berries. It's not a very tall plant. You're looking at something that's like 4 inches, which is about like this big, to maybe 16 inches tall. Now, the catch on this is um, they're usually growing in moss because the moss is so deep that you don't notice how big the plant really is. If you were to dig down to where the actual soil is, you'd realize these plants are much taller than you think. So they like to grow in mossy areas and usually boggy areas that are kind of wet. Um, but they can grow in other areas. It's surprising. I've seen them growing on the side of the road in kind of sandy soil. You wouldn't think they'd be growing there, but they really try. So you got to give them some credit for that. They're really good at that. So they have those hard dark green leaves, which is really good identifier for them. They're oval shaped and they almost look like a little tongue. Do you guys see how they look like a little tongue? They got a line down the middle that's really deep. So they kind of look like little teeny green tongues, and they're oval shaped. If you see the flower on them, it's really, really light colored. It's like a pale pink to almost white color, and it's shaped like a bell. And you can even see the little part of the bell that would ring the bell. Almost, it looks like that in the middle, and that's the stamen. So it looks really like a really fancy looking bell if you see the flowers out there. And they're usually in big groups. Like they usually have a lot of berries or a lot of flowers all together, which is really cool. And what they make is they make this sturdy red round fruit, and it's hard. It's really, really sturdy. And that's why you can use a berry picker on them, really easy, and you don't have to worry about crushing them. You can freeze them and thaw them, and they still hold their shape. Like these things are really good. The catch is though they taste better after a frost. You guys remember which other berry tastes really good after frost? You guys remember back to that one? The crowberry, right? So remember your trick. If you're picking them a little bit early, put them in your freezer, take them out of the freezer, and then they'll be a lot tastier. So they taste better after a frost. But the funny thing is, they will actually stay on the bush all winter. Next spring, you will still find them connected to the bush. If nothing else found them, they'll still be on there. and they're still good. Um, they usually can get a little bit fermented in the spring. So I usually suggest you, if you want to pick them in the winter, pick them when it's still really cold. So you can go out in January and pick these if you really wanted to, and they would be perfectly fine. If you wait till like March, they get a little bit of kick to them. So I picked them before that, but they are really good berries, and they're also really high in vitamin C. So really, really good. They are the citrus of the berry world in many ways. A lot of people think of cranberries that way, and these lingonberries are very similar. They have lots of vitamin C. And so vitamin C usually breaks down. Even if you put it in the freezer and stuff, it breaks down over time. But cranberries have so much, just like the rose hips, that they're still good. 6 months later, they still have vitamin C. They're still providing that, which is really impressive to a lot of people, especially in the science community. They'll tell you that's super rare. Like you don't see that, but you do see it with cranberries, lingonberries, and you also see it with rose hips. So they're really important berries and good berries to know. All right, so that's all the berries we're going to go over today. You might know some other berries I didn't cover today. So what I decided to do is just stick with berries that are easy to find, berries that people usually know and are looking for, and also berries that are hard to get mixed up with anything else. So these ones that pretty much can't get them too mixed up if you have a guide. I suggest you take a guide with you, either a person who knows berries really well if you're going to pick berries, or taking a berry book with you, and double check. And if you're ever in doubt, you don't know what it is, just don't pick it. Just take pictures of it, and you can show the pictures to somebody else, and then they can let you know. There are dangerous berries out there. There's things like baneberries that you really don't want to pick because they're dangerous. So it's always better to be sure. Some resources. Just gonna plug the library because I work here. If you wanted to find our books on it, in the library section, you want to go to the Alaska nonfiction section, and there's two different places you can look. The 641s have a lot of great stuff. So 641.3 will get you a lot of books, but there's also some in Alaska section 581. So 581 will also get you some really good berry identification books. So check it out. We've got lots of them, and we'd love for you guys to have them and use them and have them help you when you're doing your berry picking. Another good one is the Cooperative Extension Office. They might still be closed due to circumstances, but I believe they're still taking emails. You can try and giving them a call. They might be answering their phones as well, and they can give you more information over the phone or by email. So go ahead and Google them if you want. Just look them up online. They'll have more information on their website. But the Cooperative Extension Office does a lot. They have a lot of information on recipes, on jam making. So they're a great resource. I would definitely use them. The Fish and Game Office is another great resource. They have lots of information, lots of people who are very, very skilled at what they do. And they're located on K Beach Road, right next to the Cooperative Extension Office. So they're kind of like really close together. And those are two really great places. Feel free to give them a call. Feel free to send them some emails. And I'm sure some of them might even be able to meet and talk with you depending on circumstances. So it's definitely some ones that you want to hit. Also, if possible, going with people who are experienced is always the best. Getting firsthand experience, actually seeing the berries and being able to be shown the differences is huge. I usually say, practice identifying them locally. So if you have some ones that are nearby your area that you think, it's good to kind of familiarize yourself and kind of check out that bush several different times, and then pretty soon you'll start realizing you notice it other places. So practicing identifying locally is really good. Even if other people are getting to the berries, you can still see the leaves and the flowers on the bush. So that's still going to help you. All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm terrible. So give us an email at the Kenai Community Library, and we can actually send you some information. If you're interested in getting a guide, we have a 2-page guide that has the pictures of the berries as well as our information about the identifying features listed. Kind of like a nice little shorthand if you ever want it. Just send us an email. We can send that to you. We also have a list of recipes that we can send you. So if you want that, feel free to just send us an email and we can get that for you. Because it's kind of nice sometimes just to have the pictures and have some of the stuff listed out. And everyone's different about what helps them with learning berries. So I've tried to do a lot of different things to help you identify them, but you might have other special notes that help you with those particular berries. So it's nice to be able to take notes and put them next to stuff. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It was great having you. I hope you had a great time. Hope to catch you guys at some other point. Thank you so much for participating and have a wonderful day.